Today we're going to talk about a few things that beginner and intermediate guitar players stress about that just don't matter. I used to stress about these things and I wasted a lot of time worrying about if I was doing things right or playing things correctly. And it helped a lot when I realized that these things don't matter. So hopefully this can save you some time too and some frustration. And you should really stick around to the end because the last one we're going to talk about is really important to stop worrying about. So number one, a lot of people, when they're playing bar chords, and this may be for more intermediate players than absolute beginners, but when you're playing bar chords, especially the 5th string rooted bar chords, so if you're playing like a D major chord here, a lot of people, myself included, worried about how do you fret this and hold down everything on this bar and make sure that high E string is ringing out. And it doesn't matter. It's on the chord charts that it's part of the chord, but that high E string can be ignored. I haven't played this shape with that high E string ringing out probably since I was a beginner. I don't even know if I could do it because I don't even focus on it. I just mute it out with my index finger, and I take all the stress off of this index finger by really just fretting that 5th string and then just laying it over the other string so that it can mute them. Because that sounds great as a chord, and nobody's going to notice that that high E string isn't there. You can do this with the minor shapes too, right? And this is easier to get that high E string ringing out. And you have that high note in there that you can hear. But if you don't want to put all that stress on your index finger and save some stamina, then you can just do what you did on the major chords, or what I did on the major chords, and just lay this finger over these other strings and just mute them out. So the difference is negligible, and the high E string is a string that I don't play in these type of chords because I can save myself some effort of trying to bar 5 strings with one finger by just leaving that one note out. So if you're having trouble grabbing this shape and getting that high E string to ring out, then just forget about it. Stop wasting your time. It doesn't matter. On this channel we like to talk guitar, and we're trying to get better at guitar. So if that's something you're into, then please like and subscribe. So moving on, this next one that we're going to talk about is similar in fashion, but it's really about when you're strumming. So you have a let's just take an open G chord. That's a 6 string chord, but you don't need to strum all 6 strings every time you play that chord. You don't always need to be strumming all 6 strings. And this is something, you see those chord charts and it's got all 6 strings marked off as notes that you play, and that makes it difficult for a beginner to be able to stop strumming all 6 strings and realize that you don't have to do that. You can just play the low strings. You can just play the high strings. You can just play the middle strings. Or you can do a combo. And it's going to give you more dynamic range by not strumming all 6 strings all the time. But it's just not something to stress out. When you see a chord chart and it's got all the strings on it, it goes along with leaving out the high E string. You don't have to play all the strings all the time. And it's going to sound better if you don't. And the next tip is chord voicings. So there's a lot of people that worry about, well, how do I play a G chord right? How do I play an E minor chord right? How do I play an A chord right? And there is really no right way because there's hundreds of different chord voicings for every chord. So like you can play a G chord like this with your middle finger on the 3rd fret of the B string. You can play a G chord like this, taking that B string and making it open this time. using your pinky and leaving out your index finger, you can play a G chord like this. You can play a G chord like this. They're all just different chord voicings, so the fingerings don't matter. And then on top of that, you have an E minor chord and an A minor chord that a lot of beginners are like, well, which finger should I use? Because they see some tabs that say, use your middle and ring finger to play an E minor chord. And that's fine. Other tabs say use your index finger and your middle finger to play an E minor chord. And that's fine. And the fingerings that you should use to play these type of chords really should depend on the song that you're playing. Like if you're playing a G chord and you're going to a C chord next, you may not want to play that chord with this shape with all 4 fingers, because this jump to a C chord is a pretty big jump. So you may need to train your fingers to play this shape for a G chord, and then it's a real easy jump to a C chord. But none of these fingerings really matter. It's just what's your application in the song that you're playing based on how you should finger them. And when you're playing an E minor, if you're going to a C chord, it's a little easier to go to that C chord if you're playing this with your ring and your middle finger than it is from here with your index finger and your middle finger. That's a much bigger jump. And you have the same thing with the A chord. You see people play an A chord like this. This is how I've learned to play an A chord with just one finger. And again, when I'm playing this A chord like this, I'm muting out that high E string. And nobody's ever been like, that's not the right way to play an A chord. You're missing the high E string, because nobody notices. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Plenty of other ways to play an A chord. I learned how to play an A chord like this when I was first starting out. There's other ways to play this A chord. You could play it like this. You can play it like this, which I don't know if anybody does that, but I don't. But anyways, you know, just try and have fun with this stuff and stop worrying about these minute details that don't matter. As you get better, you can start worrying about this stuff if you really care. Like if you really want to include that low or that high E string for like a finger picking song or something, then you can really work it out and get it in there. But otherwise, don't worry about this stuff. Just strum the guitar, learn songs, and have fun. And then the last tip that I have for you, this is one I struggled with a lot when I was a beginner guitar player, is thinking that you're not playing songs right and thinking you have to play everything perfect and you have to play everything note for note. Which, if you ever go to a bar and there's a guy with an acoustic guitar, I can guarantee you he is going to play some songs that are not perfect. He's not playing them note for note. He's just playing the basic chords that are behind everything and he's just singing along. And you know who notices? Nobody. Nobody cares. As long as he's singing the vocals right, no one cares. And that's one of the biggest things about guitar, is that nobody cares. The stuff we're worrying about, nobody else cares about it. So one of the #1 things is you don't need to play every song perfect. Like, I wanted to learn What I Got by Sublime when I first started out. And this song is a picking song. Like you pick it with a pick. You arpeggiate the chord essentially, and it's a D to a G. And this song got me frustrated and I couldn't play it at first. And it goes like this. So you're just picking notes, you're arpeggiating through the chord, and if you don't know what that means, that just means picking single notes of the chord instead of strumming the chord. And that's a difficult thing to do for beginners, is to pick those notes accurately, so you can get frustrated really quick. Well, you should focus on having fun and being able to play these songs, and then as you get better, you can work on playing them right, if you want to, or you can keep playing them the way you're playing them and nobody's going to care. But if I learned to play that song like this, instead of with that arpeggiated thing, I'll go into just a strumming pattern that I could have used instead. Now, it's not perfect, but it still sounds good. And it's once you add the vocals on top of that, everyone notices that that's What I Got by Sublime. Nobody's really sitting there like, oh, I really wish he was picking that song instead of strumming it. They're like, all right, let's go. Let's sing along to What I Got. And there's more songs like this. Anything with a riff in it that's difficult. I don't know if any of you are Grateful Dead fans, but you can play their songs a ton of different ways, right? So if you took Althea by the Grateful Dead, it's got this walk up in it. And it's got this cool line to it with this bounce in it. But as a beginner, if you want to play Althea by the Grateful Dead, I mean, what's happening underneath there is you have a B minor to an A to an E to an A to a B minor to an A to an E. Right? And if you just play those chords instead of playing that whole little walk-up riff, and instead of picking all those chords, you just go. Then you're going to be able to play that song and you're going to be able to sing along. And as soon as you start singing those lyrics, everybody's going to notice that that's Althea by the Grateful Dead that knows that song. And yeah, it'll sound better once you can start playing those in-between licks and the little picking ideas during the chords. But it still works without that. So don't get frustrated and don't waste all your time on trying to play everything note for note. You should really just be worrying about having fun while you play this instrument. And it is hard to play guitar. So, work things out the easy way first so that you can have fun and you're more interested to pick it up again. Because if you start playing stuff that's way over your head and you're getting frustrated because you can't play it in time or you can't play it right and you're playing it too sloppy, then just play an easier version, because the more frustrated you get, the less likely you're gonna keep picking up the guitar. So don't worry about playing everything perfect. Literally nobody cares. Nobody's gonna know. It's really just stuff that we're worrying about that does not matter in the grand scheme of things. We should just be worried about how can we have more fun on this instrument. So if we're getting frustrated, then just forget it. Play it a little easier so that you can have fun with it. You're gonna have fun if you're playing those chords and singing along. You're gonna be like, look what song I can play, right? You're not gonna care once you actually start playing the easier version, because you're gonna get through the whole song and be like, this is pretty cool that I can do this. I hope you like this lesson. I hope it saves you some frustration, and let me know in the comments if there's anything that you have worried about in your guitar playing that really doesn't matter. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.